All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am happy to be here this afternoon to introduce the Director of the Office of Violence Against Women, Laura Rogers, who is here in town to make an announcement this afternoon, as well as to attend our Northern District of Ohio Conference on Domestic Violence Challenges and Responses. That will be tomorrow. I'm also joined by Judge Sherry Maday of the Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court. In just a moment, Director Rogers will announce the grants, but I wanted to point out at the outset here that while in the past fiscal year we have filed a record number of violent crime indictments, and we're still looking at the final numbers there, those numbers include more than 40 people who illegally had a firearm in violation of federal law because they had a misdemeanor domestic violence conviction or had tried to buy a gun while they were under an active order of protection. So we've got the enforcement part that we are continuing to work on, but I think it's really important for us to highlight today that our work and our commitment extends to our local partners. It goes way beyond enforcement and way beyond prosecution. And we are, as an entire department, we are forward thinking on this. We are focused on prevention just as much as we are focused on enforcement. And that is reflected in the announcements today. You're going to hear about a dedicated domestic violence docket that Judge Maday has provided outstanding leadership in getting established and getting up and running, and will be the recipient of a grant. We've also got a citywide expansion for a lethality assessment that has been developed by the Cleveland Division of Police. We will also have money that is going to be earmarked for the Rape Crisis Center to work with the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Center for victims who are hard of hearing. We also have money that will be earmarked for the Domestic Violence and Child Advocacy Center for supervised visitation and safe exchange of children. So I will turn it over to Director Rogers at this point in time to make the official announcement on those awards. Thank you. Director?
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here in Cleveland today to represent the Department of Justice and the Office on Violence Against Women. Thank you to the Cleveland Municipal Court and to United States Attorney Justin Herdman for hosting us in his district. Thank you for the work, Justin, that you are doing here in the Northern District of Ohio. Thank you for all of the outstanding work you are doing to take guns out of all of the hands of convicted domestic abusers and to take abusers who violate these laws off of the streets. Your leadership on this issue, along with several of your fellow U.S. attorneys, is critical to the Attorney General's priority of ending violent crime, especially with respect to domestic violence and sexual assault. I'd like to welcome Judge Sherry Maday. Judge Maday is located at the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas and is presiding over the felony high-risk domestic violence document. I'd also like to thank and welcome Sandra Miller, the CEO of the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. Thank you for all of the work you do and your team does for victims here in Cleveland, and thank you for being here today for this announcement. I'm so pleased to announce that across the Department of Justice's grant-making offices, which includes the Office of Justice Programs, as well as the Office on Violence Against Women, as well as community-oriented policing, we are releasing over 100 grants totaling $142.6 million awarded to entities in the state of Ohio. 65 of those grants, totaling over $29 million, are here in the Northern District of Ohio. These grants enhance crime-fighting efforts across the state. They strengthen the justice system's ability to hold offenders accountable. They ensure victims can get the assistance they need to recover and be safe. Of special note is the $1 million that the Bureau of Justice Assistance was awarded to Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas to establish a court for handling high-risk, felony-level domestic violence cases. The project builds off the county's efforts under an Office on Violence Against Women's funded initiative to reduce domestic violence homicides. The Bureau of Justice Assistance has also awarded an additional $3 million to the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office to continue its Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, or SAKI, and the City of Akron received $1.98 million in SAKI funding this year also. This grant has equipped law enforcement and prosecutors with resources to work cases associated with recently tested sexual assault kits. OVW alone just awarded $13.6 million in grants to entities in Ohio. 10 of those awards, totaling over $4 million, are in the Northern District of Ohio. This funding will provide transitional housing for domestic violence victims, additional law enforcement, prosecution and victim service staffing, and enhanced access for services for victims with disabilities. As you are aware, October is Domestic Violence Month Awareness. It is an opportunity to call attention to the severe and lasting harm that domestic violence levels on victims and families and communities. As we commemorate Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I want to take a special moment to salute law enforcement officers, prosecutors, judges, victim service providers, and so many others who work with victims on a daily basis to end this abuse and help victims find safety, security, and justice. The Department of Justice is so very grateful to those in law enforcement professions who put their lives on the line each day with every domestic violence call that comes in. I know firsthand that domestic violence calls are the most dangerous for law enforcement to answer. I was a prosecutor in the Family Domestic Violence Unit in San Diego County for many years, and I specialized in child abuse and child homicide and domestic violence homicides. On my first ride-along as a prosecutor, I was riding with the sergeant, and we were called to a domestic violence case that had ended already with a gunshot blast to the face of an individual involved in that case. The Department of Justice and Office on Violence Against Women are grateful to the officers who are the first to arrive on the scene in those cases, who put their lives on the line for victims who are unfamiliar to them, strangers to them, but yet they go through those doors not knowing what they're going to find on the other side. We also recognize those who coordinate to work for services for survivors of domestic violence, helping them to move from victim to survivor by empowering them to independence through transitional housing and economic justice. Domestic Violence Awareness Month gives us all an opportunity to reflect on the extraordinary efforts in cities and towns across the country who open doors to safety for victims and their children to help them rebuild their lives, and we send a message that domestic violence cannot and will not be tolerated. An example of the efforts here in Cleveland, where there is a high-risk team that is employing innovative strategies to prevent domestic violence homicides. This team includes representation from law enforcement, prosecutors, the Child Advocacy Center, Victim Witness Services, and a number of community-based organizations. The model used is a risk assessment system to identify cases with the greatest potential for reassault or murder. The team forms intervention plans to interrupt the cycle of escalating violence, monitors offenders, shares information across disciplines, closes the gaps, and strategically and comprehensively addresses the most dangerous cases. I would also like to acknowledge the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center in partnership with the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Center. They provide accessible and effective services to victims with disabilities. The necessary services provided by your center changes lives. Thank you so very much. The work of so many Department of Justice grantees here in the Northern District of Ohio and across the country is so critical to community safety. I am so honored to be here today and announce this funding and to thank these organizations and the U.S. Attorney Justin Herdman for his leadership. So thank you to each of you for your work that you do every day. It is so important and so necessary and so very appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Rogers. We will now hear from Judge Sherry Maday. Judge?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today, Director. And I'm just so pleased that our court has been awarded this grant from the Department of Justice. This is a $1 million grant over the next 3 years to address felony offenses against intimate partners. Only defendants who are a high risk for future domestic violence, dangerousness, lethality, and recidivism will be eligible for participation. While we finalize the criteria for the docket, it's important to note that allegations of strangulation and use of a weapon will be key criteria. Strangulation is a priority for this docket because research has found that it is the best predictor for a subsequent domestic violence homicide. The purpose of this docket is to consistently address felony intimate partner domestic violence cases, to hold all the participants in the prosecution of a case accountable through the entire litigation process, and to improve the safety of and mitigate the death of victims. Over the past few years, our county has dealt with high-profile domestic violence homicides. There are so many more that may not garner the public's attention that we see on a regular basis. What we know about domestic violence is that certain behaviors are predictable. When we can predict behavior, we can prevent it, and that's our goal. This docket would not have been possible without the overwhelming support of the partners that will participate in the docket. Our court's administrative judge, John Russo, the court administration and the probation department, our county executive, Armin Budish, and the Cuyahoga County Witness Victim Services Center and its manager, Jill Smilek. Throughout the mapping of this docket and the idea to really move forward with it, our U.S. Attorney, Justin Herdman, has been a sounding board and has offered any help that his office can give to the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas. Our county prosecutor, Michael O'Malley, our public defender, Mark Stanton, were on board from day one. And as we all know, data is so important when it comes to these grants and making sure that the work that we're doing is seeing a difference in the community. Dr. Jeff Krushmeyer from Case Western Reserve University. Without this active role that every partner has taken in the mapping of this docket, I don't know that we would have received this grant. I think it's very unique with all the participation. Our timeline and project plan will include a setup period of about 4 to 6 months, where we will meet with stakeholders to create policies and procedures, complete assessment training, and our action plan and information sharing system. By month 6, we'll be accepting our first pre-qualified cases. Once again, I want to thank U.S. Attorney Justin Herdman and Director Laura Rogers for this opportunity.
Thank you, Judge. Okay, I think that concludes our prepared remarks, and we'll be available for any questions afterwards here. Thanks.